We remember those who have given their lives in service to our country while protecting the freedoms and ideals we hold dear. Many of our fellow Americans remain unaware of the major contributions Native Americans have made to our nation's armed forces. In fact, American Indians serve in their country's armed forces in greater numbers per capita than any other ethnic group, and they have served with distinction in every major conflict for over 200 years. Kevin Gover.
Native American tribes of the United States today are respected for their heritage and history. Their history includes tragedies that at times take away from the achievements and milestones that the Native Americans have accomplished. They were still able to persevere. Throughout American history, Native Americans have had a huge impact on the U.S. military through the exchange of tactics, culture, and ideas. They explored the use of language as a military strategy. They dealt with the challenges of becoming recognized as United States citizens and encountering racial discrimination. Following British rule over the colonies in the mid-18th century, America's relationship between the Native Americans and the military dwelled with discrimination, as for a large portion of time, Native Americans were not felt to be their human equivalent to many white members of the military. Native American tribes have had an immense impact all the way from the American Revolution to this very day. This ranges from tribes of the Northeast, such as the Iroquois, to the Apache in the Southwest. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, a draft was implemented. Indian men were required to register for the draft even though they were not considered to be citizens at this time.
It's not even a month later. The draft board called me and says, "I want you." Uncle Sam wanted me. So I went.
Citizenship for Indians was not determined by place of birth, but by whether or not they had taken an allotment and were considered competent. Nonetheless, they enlisted in large numbers. Many of the volunteers were eager to gain war honors and maintain the warrior traditions of their tribes. An estimated 10,000 Indians served during the war, many of whom celebrated their tribal war ceremonies before and after returning. The Iroquois tribe even declared war on the Axis powers, showing their support with the United States. These natives exchanged their civilian lifestyle for an unfamiliar military experience. They were also able to make use of their unique language within the military. Members of the Choctaw tribe transmitted messages using their native language, thus making it impossible for the enemy to intercept and understand. Not until 1919, Congress passed an act which conferred citizenship for all Indians who served in the military during World War I. The majority of Native Americans, although born in the U.S., were not considered citizens through most of the time in which America has existed. Directly after World War I, Congress offered citizenship to veterans, although many were unaware of it. Many tribesmen distinguished themselves highly during the war, proving to Congress that if they could assimilate into military life, perhaps civilian life as well. There hadn't been a single all-Native American unit created. They'd served and fought as equals with their white counterparts. This big push for Native American assimilation culminated in the 1924 Indian Citizenship Act. The Indian who has suffered 1,000 wrongs, considered the white man's burden, threw himself into the struggle to help throttle the tyranny of the Hun. The Indian helped to free all the small nations, helped to give victory to the Stars and Stripes. Now shall we not redeem ourselves by redeeming all the tribes? Sadly, Native American rights were still left largely to state governments. Code talkers were Native Americans in both world wars that used their language to create code that could be communicated between units. This technique was obtained after exploring the Choctaw language and its coding potential back in World War I. However, by the time World War II came around, the Choctaw, along with many other native languages, were much easier to decode due to the technological advancements in decryption. Code talkers as a whole were now next to useless. It wasn't until Philip Johnson, an engineer that grew up on the Navajo reservation, suggested his idea for a code using the Navajo language. The Navajo language was never put down in writing, therefore very few non-natives understood the tongue. Together, the military and the 30 recruited Navajo speakers created a complex coding system consisting of over 400 terms. Many of the words were translated into typical English words, which were then translated into military terms. For example, Kalo in Navajo translated to shark in English, which was then code for destroyer.
An observation plane carries no armament, doesn't pick a fight, just goes out and observes, and usually flies at night. And so we took those characteristics and said, well, those characteristics fit characteristics of an owl. Does very much the same thing. So the code word for observation plane became Nashja, which is owl.
By exchanging languages, the two groups joined together to communicate with unmatchable efficiency within the U.S. military. Eventually, about 400 Navajos served in the military as code talkers during World War II. These code talkers on the battlefield acted as regular soldiers along with communicators.
Something like a regular Marine. You get shot, you shoot back.
They took part in many battles, most notably Iwo Jima and Guadalcanal. However, among campaigns, the Navajo were often mistaken for Japanese soldiers and accidentally shot by their fellow comrades. It got to the point where the Navajo would have to be guarded by a commander. Despite encountering these racial hardships, the Japanese were never able to decipher the code, making it an extremely valuable asset to winning the war in the Pacific.
Our Navajo code was one of the most important military secrets of World War II. The fact that the Marines did not tell us Navajo men how to develop that code indicated their trust in us and in our abilities. The feeling that I could make it in both the white world and the Navajo world began there, and it has stayed with me all of my life. For that, I am grateful. Corporal Chester Nez, Navajo Code Talker, U.S. Marines.
World War II became a turning point for both Indians and Caucasians because its impact on each was so great and different. Whites believed that World War II had completed the process of Indian integration into mainstream American society. On the other hand, large numbers of Indians explored for the first time the non-Indian world at close range. It both attracted and repelled them. They encountered many positives, including a higher standard of living with healthcare, education, and job opportunities. The negative aspects were the lessening of tribal influence and the threat of forfeiting the security of the reservation. Indians did not want equality with whites in exchange of losing group identification. In sum, the war caused the greatest change in Indian life since the beginning of the reservation era and taught Native Americans they could aspire to walk successfully in two worlds. Throughout U.S. military history, Native Americans have played an essential role by exchanging their own culture and ideas and allowing us to explore the possibilities that their culture had to offer, all while encountering racial discrimination. Their role has been and will continue to be a great asset within our military. Let us immortalize these brave men who have served great achievements, knowing that they played a major role to make America what it is today.
I feel good that recognition finally did come, and we know that our brothers who passed on before are up in the Marine Corps heaven, and also, I'm sure, delighted that we finally got recognition.
Let's hope they will not face the hardships they have in the past and continue on a road of success unimpeded by discrimination that lingered throughout Native service to our country.